My name is Elias. I was 27 when I left. The morning I walked out of my apartment, the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on my shoulders, testing me. It was autumn in the city, and the sky was a bruised violet, streaked with clouds that seemed to hold their breath before dawn. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the cracked sidewalk. I stood there, my boots scuffing against the pavement, my canvas rucksack slung over one shoulder. It was light, too light for someone leaving their entire life behind. A change of clothes, a worn copy of Rilke's letters to a young poet, a small folding knife, a notebook, and a half-eaten granola bar. No phone, no wallet stuffed with cards, no return ticket. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just didn't trust myself. If I'd kept a ticket, a phone, a tether to the life I was leaving, I might have turned back before I'd even begun. That's what fear does. It builds bridges back to safety. But I didn't want safety, I wanted truth. I left a note for my sister, Lena, on the kitchen table. It was short, scrawled in black ink. "I'm sorry. I need to find something. I'll be okay. E." Lena would understand, or at least she'd try. We were different. She was the grounded one, the one who built answers while I chased questions. She'd always said I saw meaning in everything. The shape of clouds, the flicker of a stranger's glance, the way a song could crack open your chest. She'd read the note, sigh, and probably mutter, "Elias, you idiot," before folding it away. I stepped outside, and the air seemed to shift, like it was nudging me forward. The city was still asleep, its pulse slow and quiet. I walked 3 blocks to the train station, my boots echoing in the empty streets. The station smelled of diesel and stale coffee, and the ticket clerk barely looked up as I bought a one-way ticket to anywhere. I didn't care where the train was going. The point wasn't the destination. The point was to move, to shake the dust of familiarity off my bones. On the train, I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the city blur into suburbs, then suburbs into fields, then fields into hills. It was like my life was dissolving behind me, each mile unraveling the threads of who I'd been. The graphic designer who showed up to a cubicle every day, the guy who nodded politely at meetings, the one who scrolled through curated lives online until his eyes burned. I'd wake up anxious, work all day pretending to be someone I wasn't, then come home to a screen that fed me other people's dreams. I was tired of it, tired of performing, tired of waiting for a life that felt like mine. 2 days later, I stepped off the train in a mountain town in the south. I don't remember its name. Beginnings are like that, slippery, half-formed, easy to forget. But I remember the air, sharp, cold, smelling of pine and wet stone. The station was little more than a wooden platform, and the town itself was a scattering of low buildings nestled against a ridge of mountains. I slung my rucksack over my shoulder and started walking. That's when I met Miro. He appeared out of nowhere, a small scruffy dog with no collar and eyes like polished amber. He trotted behind me, his paws clicking softly on the pavement, as if he'd been waiting for me to show up. I stopped, crouched down, and held out my hand. He sniffed it, then looked up at me, curious but unafraid. "All right, Miro," I said, naming him after the painter whose colors always felt like freedom. "You coming with me?" He wagged his tail, and that was that. We wandered into a forest trail just outside town. No map, no plan, just the crunch of gravel under my boots and Miro darting ahead, chasing invisible scents. The trail wound through pines, their needles carpeting the ground, and the air grew colder as we climbed. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in years, I felt awake. By late afternoon, we reached a ridge overlooking a valley that seemed to stretch forever. Rivers threaded through it like silver veins, and the trees burned with autumn colors, red, gold, orange, like a fire that didn't consume. I dropped my rucksack, sank onto a flat stone, and just stared, not at anything specific, at the vastness, the sheer overwhelming isness of it all. And then, without warning, I cried. Not the loud heaving kind, the quiet kind, where tears slip down your face and your chest aches with something too big to name. It wasn't sadness, it was relief. Like my body had finally found a place where it could breathe, where it didn't have to pretend or perform or fit. Miro curled up beside me, his warmth grounding me as the tears dried. That night, I slept under the stars. No tent, just a blanket spread over pine needles. Miro nestled against my side. The sky was a deep, endless black, pricked with light. I dreamt of falling, not the terrifying kind, but the kind where you surrender to the drop, weightless, trusting the air to catch you. I woke up with frost on my blanket and a strange sense of peace. In the days that followed, I let the world guide me. Miro and I wandered trails, slept in clearings, ate what we could find or barter for. The people I met seemed to appear exactly when I needed them, like the universe was choreographing it all. There was the old man who lived in a cabin at the edge of the forest. His hands were gnarled, his face carved with lines, but his eyes were bright as a child's. He carved birds from driftwood, each one so delicate it looked like it might fly away. One morning, as I passed his cabin, he handed me a carved sparrow without a word. I tried to thank him, but he just waved me off, as if the act of giving was enough. There was the girl who played violin in a clearing, her music weaving through the trees like a spell. She was maybe 19, with wild hair and a scarf that fluttered in the wind. She didn't ask my name or where I came from, only if I wanted to listen. I sat cross-legged on the ground, Miro at my side, and let her music wash over me. It wasn't polished or perfect. It was raw, like she was pulling the notes straight from the earth. When she finished, she smiled and said, "The forest likes it when we play for it." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, and she went back to playing. There was the woman who ran a bakery in town, her apron dusted with flour, her laugh loud enough to fill the street. She saw me sweeping leaves outside her shop one morning. Miro had been sniffing around her doorstep, hoping for scraps, and offered me a loaf of warm bread in exchange for my work. "You look like you're running from something," she said, not unkindly. I shrugged and said, "Maybe I'm running toward it." She laughed again, handed me the bread, and told me to come back if I needed more. None of them asked where I came from. That was the magic. They didn't see me as a runaway, a dropout, a failure. They saw me as someone who'd arrived, someone who belonged, even if just for a moment. I started keeping a journal. At first, it was just fragments, sketches of the valley, the way Miro's ears twitched when he slept, the smell of rain on pine. But soon, it became something else. A conversation with myself, or maybe with the universe. I wrote about the ache I'd carried for years, the sense that I was living someone else's life. I wrote about the city, how it had felt like a cage made of noise and expectations. I wrote about the stars, how they seemed to whisper that I was enough just as I was. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't posting my journey for likes or branding myself as some free-spirited wanderer. I was just existing. Honestly, for the first time, I wasn't performing. One morning, maybe 2 weeks into my wandering, Miro and I came across a weathered wooden sign at a fork in the trail. It was half buried in moss, the paint chipped and fading. It read, "The path ends here." I laughed out loud, the sound echoing through the trees. Miro tilted his head, confused, but I couldn't stop grinning. Because I understood something in that moment, something I'd been circling my whole life. The path doesn't end. It just changes. It changes when you stop trying to control it. It changes when you let go of the map, the plan, the need to know. It changes when you start walking with wonder instead of certainty. I sat by that sign for hours, Miro sprawled across my lap, the sun filtering through the pines. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Maybe the point isn't to find the path. Maybe it's to make one. Not with answers, but with questions. Not with fear, but with trust." I didn't know where I'd go next. I didn't know if I'd stay in that town or if Miro and I would keep wandering. But for the first time, I didn't need to know. The fool doesn't walk with a destination, he walks with faith. Looking back, I know now. That first step I took wasn't brave. It wasn't reckless or romantic or even particularly wise. It was necessary. I wasn't running away from my life. I was stepping into it, clumsy and unsure, like a child learning to walk. The Fool, the first card of the Tarot's major arcana, isn't a fool because he's foolish. He's a fool because he dares to leap into the unknown without a safety net. He carries a knapsack light with hope and a heart heavy with trust. Numbered 0, he's not just the beginning. He's the space before the beginning, the infinite potential of a soul unburdened by cynicism. Astrologically, the Fool is tied to Uranus, the planet of disruption, rebellion, and sudden awakenings. It's linked to Aquarius, the dreamer who sees the world not as it is, but as it could be. The Fool comes to you when you're standing at the edge of your life, restless, unrooted, aching for something you can't name. He doesn't promise answers. He doesn't offer a map. He just whispers, "Jump." The Fool is waiting, not at the end of the path, but at the start. So, what's your first step?